What's up, grinders? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be reacting to Kevin Abroad once again. This is the YouTube channel. I've reacted quite a few times as of recently, mainly because, well, he seems to be dropping quite a bit of content on topics that I like to cover. And the video we're going to be looking at this one right here. I debunked this lazy language learning method by the Fluency formula. I've covered the Fluency formula before. I have a playlist on my channel. When he first appeared on the scene, I had quite a few backward and forwards with him, especially around his claim of reaching Mandarin Chinese within 1 year to a C1 level and without living in country, and just how he did it in general, and also the fact whether he is actually a C1 level. So I'm going to watch this video. This seems to be about his method. Now, I don't know too much about Spencer's method because, well, he's selling a course. I think his method is basically just a shit ton of input. So you just do content appropriate, level appropriate input with a frequency list. At least that's my understanding of it. So we're going to just check it out and see. I'm going to speed this video up a little bit as well, just because it is quite a long video. It's 15 minutes. I'm not sure if we're even going to stick for the whole video.
In this series, I break down language learning claims online, look at the evidence behind them, and examine how those ideas are packaged and marketed.
I don't think Kevin's mentioned this before, but I think he's either studied linguistics or he's a linguist. I'm not sure. I don't want to put claims out there that aren't true, so check the comment section. I'm sure he'll leave a comment and let us know what his credentials are. If you're curious why, it's just because he's going to be talking about this subject probably from a different place from myself. I'm an experimenter. I try out things. I'm not a linguist or anything like that.
Today, we are turning our attention to a video by Spencer, who runs the channel Fluency Formula. Holy shit, that bitch sure is working overtime.
You're gonna take this stuff offline, my man.
Phew. This is gonna be a long video, y'all.
He's married. Well, I think he's married. He's got a girlfriend, at least.
Now, aside from the impressive beard, who exactly is Spencer? In his YouTube description, he describes himself as an ordinary guy from Toronto, Canada, who taught himself Mandarin in 182 days. I do remember Evildea covering one of Spencer's videos about how he learned Mandarin, and for brevity, I'll put some links down below if you want to catch up on that. But
awesome.
After this video, don't be ruining my engagement, please. I've got great jokes coming up. Anyway, the video we're looking at today is Spencer's most viral one.
The lazy method that got me fluent insanely fast. I don't even know if I've watched this video before. I haven't watched any videos from Spencer in a long time. But the problem was that he uses a lot of the similar type of thumbnails, text, and wording, so I have no idea if I've seen this video.
Where he claims to have become fluent insanely fast thanks to what he calls a lazy method. Let's dive in.
What if everything you've been taught about learning a language is—
Hey, he changed his hat. Didn't he have a hat that said something like 大龙米饭, which is just basically like big dragon rice or something? Like, I remember he had a hat that said something like that, but he changed his hat. That stood out to me. I think it was 大龙米饭. I'm not sure. Or might have been 大龙饭店, which is like, 大龙 restaurant. I'm not sure.
completely backwards. Today, I can use Chinese to navigate complex business discussions. And I did it using a method so counterintuitive that experts might even call it lazy.
Alright, so right away we get the classic YouTube hook. Everything you know about X is wrong.
Okay, so I might actually find out what is Spencer's method today. Like I said, my understanding of it, based on the very little that I've seen, is that it's just comprehensible input with frequency lists.
This kind of framing is very effective because it creates curiosity and positions the speaker as the one who's about to reveal the hidden truth about the topic. Spoiler alert, they almost never reveal anything groundbreaking. I mean, it's YouTube, we're all just weirdos talking to a camera. What do you expect?
Yeah, Elmo, he's talking about you. By the way, I am kind of curious because you do see this a lot in language learning videos. People are like, I got some groundbreaking new thing. Are you ready for it? You got to do input, output, and then you got to scratch your balls. Like, they'll always bring the same type of stuff but introduce it as groundbreaking. But I am curious, what is the most groundbreaking thing to happen in linguistics within, let's say, the last 10 years? Because I'm not a linguist. I don't know. Is someone who's a linguist, let me know.
He then goes on to say that the method is so counterintuitive that experts might even call it lazy. Now, I can pretty much guarantee you that language learning experts would never call it lazy. As we'll see later in the video, his method actually revolves around a linguistic concept that researchers have been discussing since the 80s. As for the word lazy, it's basically the same vibe as the word easy in language learning marketing. You know the classic learn language X easily promise that makes you think there's an effortless way to learn languages when there isn't.
And so one day it hit me. What if my approach to learning languages was fundamentally inefficient? I mean, what if all of this structured studying was actually the problem and not the solution? This question sent me down a neurolinguistic rabbit hole that I became obsessed with, and it ended up totally changing the way I approached studying languages.
Now we get what I would call the classic origin story trope, the moment where the speaker realizes they've been doing things the wrong way, goes down a rabbit hole, and then discovers the method that changes everything. By the way, his storytelling skills are pretty good.
Yeah, he's very good as a YouTuber. In fact, a lot of these types of channels that are trying to sell, you know, their course and stuff, it is very good for getting a lot of views via virality, but I think it's not that great for keeping people hanging around for video after video, because there's only so many times you can introduce your origin story and then do the same type of thing over and over. So it's like good for getting that initial burst. I don't know how it goes for like day to day. Like if you look at my videos, okay, I don't really have videos that go viral, but my overall engagement is actually quite high. Like a video generally within 48 hours will crack 5K views, just no matter what the video is, even if it's like just a react about some random shit. It will generally, every now and then I have one that will drop down to, you know, 2 to 3K, but like generally 5K, somewhere up to 10K.
Honestly, if I was new to language learning, I probably would have eaten it right up. And his editing is pretty good as well. Like, I hope to be rich enough one day to hire his editor.
I'm actually pretty sure he edits his own videos. Like, he's run other YouTube channels before. This is not his first rodeo. I know he has at least one other YouTube channel that he did before this one.
But anyway, one thing I would like to address here is the idea of structured studying. In the language learning space, that usually refers to the so-called traditional method. But that term is pretty vague, and at this point, it's almost become a bit of a caricature. It tends to evoke this image of language learning as endless drills and mechanical exercises, which was more typical of some mid-20th century language learning approach. In reality, modern language learning usually mixes a lot of different things. Input, practice, interaction, and yes, sometimes structured study as well, but it's not the bulk of a lesson. I mean, unless your teacher has poor or no training, which is a shame, obviously. Anyway, I just thought I'd defend language teaching for a second, because if you listen to the internet long enough, you'd think it was designed specifically to stop people from becoming fluent.
I'm about to share something with you that might sound ridiculous at first, but I promise you, it's backed by cutting-edge brain linguistic science that has helped thousands of learners who might be stuck just like you finally have a breakthrough. I call it the neurological alignment method, although a lot of my friends just call it the lazy way of mastering languages.
Alright, so here we
So I'm guessing that's a term that he made up, because he says I call it that. I'm just trying to like think neurological alignment method. Like, where's that coming from? What are you aligning?
get what I would call the just trust me bro part of the video. I'm joking, but basically we get a mention of the science without actually being shown the science. And by that, I mean a link to the actual studies.
Yeah, see, this is where I'm always very, very careful. I never say something's backed by science or, you know, based on science. I always say this is based on my experience via teaching others for years, by being a tutor, by learning languages myself, because I don't want to be the guy who's like, okay, let me go find that random fucking, you know, article in some linguistics bloody thing over here. I'm not that guy. I'm just a dude who does shit. And then if it works out, I'll let you guys know. If it doesn't, I'll let you know.
Don't get me wrong, if this were just an in my opinion video, I wouldn't expect academic references. But when someone explicitly says their method is backed by science, I think it's reasonable to expect some way to find it, right? Because from what I can tell, we are getting scientific vibes, but not actual science. Also,
True.
I kind of like how earlier he says experts might call the method lazy, but then later he adds that his friends just call it the lazy way of mastering languages. So, as it turns out, his mates are the experts.
I didn't even catch that. Yeah, no, that's kind of true. Yeah.
I'm confused.
Now, before I explain the core techniques, you need to first understand why the traditional methods simply don't work. Our brains actually aren't designed to learn languages by memorizing grammar rules or studying vocabulary lists. Think for a second about how you learned your native tongue. Did anyone drill you on conjugation tables as a toddler? Of course not. You absorbed language naturally through meaningful contexts that had some relevance to you and your life.
Okay, so it's the kid thing again. Okay, just so everyone understands, kids are actually bad at learning languages. Yes, I know they become native speakers eventually when they're, you know, if that's their first language. But it's not because, well, you got to think about it like this, okay? A kid is not just learning a language, they're building up a mental framework of how the world actually exists. They're learning about self. They're learning about, you know, this thing that's attached to me and it's like slapping me in the face. This is my hand. You know, not even my hand. This thing is a thing and I have control over it. What is this thing? Okay, like they're learning so much more. Therefore, since they have no concept of the world and they're developing that concept of the world, they're linking that with a language. But as an adult, You have a concept of the world. You have a mental framework of how the entire world works, at least up until whatever point of life you are at, okay? So no matter what, you can't get away from that framework. It exists, it's in there.
So this is another very common trope in the language learning space, the idea that we should learn languages the same way children learn their first language. And at first glance, that sounds pretty convincing because children are language learning geniuses after all, right? But there's one small detail that usually gets skipped in that comparison. Toddlers acquiring their first language and adults learning a second language are actually dealing with completely different situations. For starters, toddlers don't have a language yet. Adults already do.
Yeah, exactly. So as an adult, you have a language, you have a mental framework of the world. As a toddler, you have not yet. You are developing that framework.
And that changes things quite a bit. Because adult learners can use their existing language as a tool. We can compare structures, understand explanations, and sometimes even benefit from things like grammar descriptions or vocabulary study. And people often tell me, well, you didn't study grammar in your native language, which is true for toddlers because they are obviously not known for their study habits. But once children start school, in many countries, they absolutely do study the grammar of their native languages.
So we're going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here, then I'll provide my input on this matter. First up, devil's advocate, this is what proponents of the child method say. They say basically that yes, a child does learn grammar when they go to school. However, they have already got a fully formed, at least age-appropriate understanding of the language, okay? Understanding as in they're able to use and speak the language. That's what they say. So they say learning grammar at this point is more just for societal reasons, you know, conforming to the norm, as opposed to that is what they need to progress, or that is what they need to be able to speak the language. So that's what they say, okay? But on the flip side of things, they have, up until this point, spent, who knows, probably 10,000 hours or more with the language. So if you want to spend that amount of time to form that type of understanding of the language, and you got to remember also that they have real world interactions around them. So they have their parents interacting with them. So they're kind of learning in almost a direct method approach, as in they ask questions, they get responses instantaneously from those around them, okay? And this is literally just their job for the first 5 years of their life. Learning the language is their job, okay? They don't have other responsibilities. So if you want to replicate that, sure. But there's faster ways to do it.
Not really sure why that argument comes up so often. Maybe it's just an English-centric perspective. So yes, of course, as a toddler, you didn't start learning your languages.
I think that argument comes up quite a bit because it's coming from the perspective that natural is good. People at this time in society are looking at the world and they're saying, if it's natural, it's good. And if it's artificial and created by man, it's bad. I think that's where it comes from, a lot of it.
By studying conjugation tables, but you also had several years of full-time immersion and no other responsibilities, which is slightly
Exactly.
harder to replicate as an adult. And as I've said, most of us do end up studying grammar in school. And in many cases, that does include conjugation tables. If you're French, do let them know in the comment section below.
Now, neuroscience reveals that languages are stored in your memory in the procedural part of the brain. And it
See, I don't know anything about neural science. I just know based on experience.
turns out that this is the same neurological system that helps us with riding a bike or with typing on a keyboard. Now, traditional studying methods when it comes to learning a language targets what's called declarative memory. Now, it's really great for memorizing facts or figures or something like that, but
You know, it'd probably be smart for me to go in and study linguistics, so when I'm talking here, I can talk from a scientific perspective, but I don't want to talk from a scientific perspective. I want to talk from a perspective of actually doing and knowing, because, like, I feel like a lot of people can also get lost in the science of things. Like, you'll see this especially in the health and fitness space, where people will debate over, you know, is seed oils good for you or bad for you? You know, like, there'll be constant debates and there'll be things that will come out, science experiments that will come out, they'll say yes or no, and, you know, like, everything's contradictory, and then you have ones that come out on top of that. And that space, I understand why, is because you can experiment on yourself, but that's not really so much applicable to everyone else out. Not even then, okay? Like, in my mind, you need to experiment with these things to find the solution for yourself. You can take something from science and go, okay, that's what the consensus seems to be, but is that true in my case? I don't know if I'm getting my point across. I just feel like you should experiment, no matter what. Even when the science says it's this way, you should experiment. Obviously, there's limits. Don't jump off a building and see if you can fly. Even though I said that in the previous video, you should.
That's impossible. It should be.
Flap those fucking hands, guys. It's a big goal, I know, but if you fucking put in the effort, the time, the energy. Well, maybe not the time because you're falling from a building, but like if you put in the energy, I believe in you.
It's absolutely terrible when it comes to helping you develop an automatic skill.
So this part is actually referring to real concepts from cognitive science, but the way it's presented here doesn't really reflect what the research says. He's right in saying that declarative memory is what lets you consciously remember things like facts, vocabulary, or grammar rules.
Yeah, but we all know you can learn something via declarative memory, whatever you want to call it, and then move it into, what is it called, procedural memory? Like, I don't even know the proper terms for these things, but it's obvious from the fact that if you study something and then you practice it, so study is the declarative, and then you practice it, you automate it, it goes into the procedural. Like, I hope I'm using the terms right.
And that procedural memory is more
I am using the terms right. Okay.
about skills that become automatic over time, like, riding a bike. And again, it's true that language does involve procedural memory.
You know, that bike riding one, we could use this as an example for like 3 different ways to learn to ride a bike, okay? 1, you could sit there and watch someone get on a bike and ride a bike and get off. Let's pretend you've never ridden a bike before. You have no idea what a bike is, okay? And you watch them ride around and you watch them get off. Now, you've watched it, okay? And this would be the akin of, you listen to language. So you could have that method, or you could have someone who's like, this is a bike. This is what each part of the bike does, okay? And you sit on it, you pedal, you do, like they can explain it to you and then they give it to you, okay? So that's the second method. So the first one is you just watch someone do. The second one is they explain and then they give it to you. And the third one is, okay, basically like no one explains it to you. They just give you a bike and then you look at it and you're like, it's a mode of transport. That's all you know. So you sit on it. You might sit on it backwards. You might sit on it upside down. But you literally learn everything via errors. Now here, if I'm looking at this from like a bird's eye view, what logically is the best way to learn to ride a bike? Have someone explain it to you once. That would be like passing the grammar rules, just like going over them once to get like a bird's eye view. And then jump on and try. Logically, yeah, right? Like just someone handing you a bike where you've never seen a bike before. Obviously, you probably learn it eventually because it's a fucking bike, bro. But like, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, okay? And then watching someone jump on and then jump off, you've probably done this before, where you've watched someone do something and you're like, okay, I got this. And then you go over and then you go to do it. And then you're like, shit, what happens now? Like, I can't remember. So it's like the mix of those first two is probably the best.
Especially when you're fluent and things start to feel automatic, which, I don't know about you, is such a fascinating process in my opinion. But this is where things get a bit misleading. The way this is framed here turns it into a bit of a false choice, as if you have to choose between studying vocabulary and grammar explicitly or learning the language more naturally.
Exactly. You want to mix it. Mix it, baby. Everything's better mixed.
With the latter being presented as the proper way to learn. In reality, especially for adult learners, research generally suggests that these two systems tend to work together rather than compete with each other. In SLA, second language acquisition, the discussion is often less about choosing one approach over the other and more about how these different learning processes interact and support each other. So it's not really a case of declarative memory bad and procedural memory good. In practice, both tend to play a role in language learning. And by the way, it's not really standard in the field to...
Also, I thought Spencer's method, like we haven't seen Spencer's method, but I thought his method was learn a frequency list and then smash input, like level appropriate input. I thought that therefore, if you're learning a frequency list, that's declarative, right? Maybe I'm misunderstanding his method.
Say that explicit learning should be avoided altogether.
See, this is the hard part. He's very cagey about his actual method because obviously he's got a course. And he wants you to pay to find his method.
In fact, it would actually be a bit counterintuitive to deliberately rely on only one of these systems when you can make use of both.
So, what's the alternative? Something so enjoyable, you're going to question whether or not it's actually effective. Something you're probably already doing every single day without truly realizing its potential. Television. Yes, really. But not just any passive watching whatever the heck.
I hope he says level appropriate. Because, like, could you imagine if I just wanted to start speaking North Korean, and be like, okay, I'm just going to sit down and watch Korean propaganda with no understanding of the language, like 10,000 hours to become an A1, here we go!
Happens to be on the television. This is a strategic visual approach to taking regular entertainment and transforming it into the most powerful of language acquisition tools. Now, I'm just going to say it, this isn't about zoning out to foreign films with your native tongue subtitles on the TV. It's about creating a deliberate experience that mimics how your brain naturally acquires a language.
So, after all that build-up, the alternative is television. I mean... okay.
Okay, so that's the groundbreaking method. Okay, yep.
Again, I'm not saying this is a bad idea. Watching content in your target language is pretty much how I got to a high level of fluency in English. But the way it's framed here makes it sound like a secret technique when really it's just rebranding something language learners have been doing for years. He also says this mimics how your brain naturally acquires language, but that's a bit of a stretch. Because children don't learn language just by listening or watching stuff, they learn through interaction with feedback and actual communication. Otherwise, every kid with a TV would be a polyglot.
And the results were astonishing.
Yeah, this is actually an issue. So nowadays, we've got kids that are so glued to iPads because obviously it's easy for the parent to give the kid an iPad, and they're watching fucking Coco Melon that their brains are getting fried, and they're actually intellectually behind their peers who are not just glued to iPads every day. So that literally shows that you shouldn't just be giving them just content to watch. They have to interact with the language to make progress.
The content selection is critical and has to follow the comprehension 80-20 rule. Start with content that you understand about 80%.
Okay, so good. He is introducing the, you know, the, well, 80-20. No, that's actually really low. If you're doing 80% comprehension, that is really difficult. That's going to be mentally taxing because you're going to be missing, like in a sentence of 10 words, okay, you're going to be missing like 2 to 3 words.
Either through the visuals on the screen, the context that's provided to you, or something to do with emotions maybe that the person is using on screen. This creates the perfect zone where your brain is able to infer.
That's not the perfect zone. Perfect zone would be 95% plus, okay? I'm just throwing out numbers right now, and it's very hard to find content that's at that absolute perfect level, okay? But you want to go for 90% plus or 95% plus, but, you know, pick what you can find, you know, depending on your language. We're going to be realistic here. No one's got like a fucking percentage meter next to every video. How awesome would that be if you had like a little percentage meter that popped up and said, you're going to understand 95% of the content of that video? Man, that would be a hell of an app. But my point being here is, okay, is just saying 80-20, 80, not good.
Without getting frustrated about not understanding the peripheral things.
Now, this part I kind of agree with. You do want content that you can mostly follow so you can infer meaning without getting completely lost. He calls it the 80-20 rule, which I think refers to the Pareto principle.
Oh, that's what I call it, yeah, Pareto.
But here, it's really just a rough guideline for comprehension. However, a recent study suggests that 80% is actually on the low end, especially depending on the context. And that study suggested that 95 was actually...
Bro, I'm not a fucking linguist, I just know these things.
Optimal. I'll put a link down below. But at that point, we're basically just back to input theory, which is the idea that you learn from understanding what you hear or read. So yes, this method works, but it's not really new. He then suggests to gradually move on to more complex content, which makes absolute sense. I don't have any comments on that.
Now, there are 2 ways to implement this technique: active immersion and passive immersion. Active viewing, as you can probably guess, means giving your complete undivided attention to the content. I'm talking about no phone scrolling, no multitasking, no distractions from other devices or notifications, full mental engagement on what you're studying. Now, passive immersion is also very valuable, but solves a different neurological purpose. This is where you allow content to play in the background while you're working out or cooking or commuting.
So he introduced active learning, but that would be it depends what he means by active learning.
Or doing any other activity. This allows your brain to continue to process the patterns of the language, although subconsciously. And just a quick note, sorry, it doesn't work while you're sleeping. Anyway, the real breakthrough came for me when I combined these 2 approaches. I would actively watch new content and then replay it several times while doing other things.
Yeah, this part makes sense. If you're actually paying attention, you're gonna learn more. So
okay, so active learning to him is just watching the content, like actively focusing on it. Okay. And then his version of passive is just re-listening to the same content. Nothing wrong with that.
far, so good. But the passive immersion thing, I'm a bit less convinced. Having something in the background might help a little, but it's not the same as actually focusing on it. I'm not even sure how useful it really is. If you take something...
I've said that before in my videos as well. I'm not sure, like based on my own experience, I'm not sure how useful it is, but every now and then there will be some people who state that they're linguists and they're like, oh no, there's definitely benefits to be had by listening to things passively, but I don't know if it's... Like, I use the word measurable, and when I say measurable, I mean in the context of I notice a difference by doing it. And I've never noticed a difference by just leaving something playing while I'm doing other stuff. Like, maybe for music, at least you get some type of enjoyment out of it, but like, yeah. Like, even if I'm listening to something I've already actively focused on, I'm either going to be listening to it or I'm going to be doing something else. I'm not going to be doing both.
Like Krashen's theory, for example, the idea is that learning happens when you understand the input. But if something is just playing in the background and you're not really paying attention, Are you actually understanding anything? Now, I did look into this, and I couldn't find much strong evidence for the idea that passive immersion by itself is doing that much. But if any of you know of a good study on that, please feel free to share it in the comment section below. And then combining both, like watching something and replaying it later, I mean, yeah, that can help. Repetition is useful, but calling that a breakthrough is a bit much.
Now, here's where my approach becomes truly controversial. I recommend minimal speaking. That means minimal output practice until you've accumulated about 300 or so hours of...
Okay, so this is not ALG. This is not Refold. This is like a sped up ALG, in a way. Because he's like, I don't know if frequency lists are even a part of this anymore, but you are actively watching content at your level, and then at 300 hours, that's when you start to try speak. Okay, it seems to be just a sped up ALG at the moment.
quality input time. Now, I know this flies in the face of conventional wisdom that says you need to start speaking from day one. Your brain needs to build strong recognition patterns before production becomes natural.
Okay, credit where it's due, he's self-aware enough to say this is controversial.
I don't know if this is controversial. Like, okay, maybe it's scientifically controversial, but I've actually heard people say this all the time. Like on YouTube, I've heard people say this all the time. You shouldn't be speaking. Like, speaking was big back when Benny Lewis was popping off. Okay, so there was another YouTuber. His name was Benny Lewis. I'm pretty sure he started the whole learn a language in 3 month thing. He was massive on promoting, you got to start speaking from day one, and then everyone was talking about it at that point. And now the thing seems to be, everyone's like, you got to be quiet from day one. And I feel like we just go through these like periods of, you know, it's the speaking era and it's the listening era, you know.
To be fair, the idea of getting a lot of input before speaking does make some sense. But the whole 300 hours and minimal speaking thing feels a bit arbitrary.
Yeah, it is very arbitrary. Like 300 hours, is that language appropriate or like... Why 300 hours?
There isn't really a point where your brain suddenly becomes ready to speak. And this is actually something people debate a lot in linguistics.
This is like something as well in the ALG community. It's like, how did they come up with that initial assumption? So for like, what was it? Thai was like 2,000 hours before you start speaking. I think it was basically just based around the course length. I gotta reread the book. I can't remember what it said.
You've got people like Krashen who emphasize input, but then you've got other researchers like Swain who argue that speaking itself plays an important role because it helps you notice gaps and process the language.
Yeah, see, I would probably be more in her camp.
And more broadly, a lot of research also highlights the role of interaction and feedback, so I wouldn't treat this as a strict rule. It's more about finding a balance than waiting for some magic number of hours.
You know, the interesting thing is, because I've done a lot of crosstalk recently with Spanish Boost Gaming. There's a playlist. Go check it out. Become a member. Help me in the channel. Okay. The reason I'm bringing this up is because when I do that crosstalk with him, I am fully engaged with him for like 2 hours. Like that is my focus. Just playing a game, listening to him speaking Spanish, having a conversation with him. And due to the fact that I am fully engaged in a conversation with someone for that period of time, that seems to be way higher quality input than say just watching videos passively. Because, you know, you watch a video passively, you might like your phone might bing and you'll be like, what's going on over here or something. You know, like there's always distractions. But when you're in a conversation with someone, that's your focus. Like if you were to do 1,000 hours of just watching content as opposed to 1,000 hours of actually having conversations with someone, that 1,000 hours of conversations would get you like probably way like double the distance to the other 1,000 hours. Like it's a thing that I've kind of wanted to test theoretically, where I want to, like, I don't have time for this, but like my idea would be for a series, okay, to try learn a language just via tutors. That would be it. Now, obviously, it'd be too expensive for me to do. Like, I don't have I do have the resources available, but my wife would stab me. But imagine just learning a language just with talking to people. I reckon you'd get so much further than any of these methods because it's constant interaction.
Alright guys, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you found this useful and that you enjoyed this second episode of the debunking series.
There was some science in here, like actual science stuff that was dropped. I think he mentioned at least one. Let me have a look at the description. Study on lexical coverage mentioned summary of the output. Okay, yeah, so there is some in here. I feel like I pretty much know most about what science says at the moment. I just can't reference it. Like, I just don't know. Like, I know most of what it says just via experience. What's this person saying? One of the testimonials in his website was a guy wearing a Walmart vest and clearly recording from a parking lot. The website is a minefield for grifter red flags. I disliked him, but then he tried and thankfully failed, like his follicles trying to grow hair, to pay my favorite Japanese immersion content creator to be featured in her videos, and I hate him since then. Okay, like, I'm not here for the insults. I don't want to insult the guy. I do find it interesting that this is a very marketing thing, obviously, you know, paying content creators to appear on their content. But anyway, yeah, if you like his content, go check out the channel, give it a sub. It's always good to have people who actually, you know, are linguists in this space giving their thoughts on things, especially if they're kind of interesting, you know. Like, interesting people overall. And yeah, if you like my video, of course, make sure you sub, and I'll see you all in the next one.